Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle Gray, the Director of Programming for the New York Times live conversation series TimesTalks, which pairs New York Times journalists with the brightest and boldest creative minds from the fields of film, theater, fashion, music, art, and literature. To find out who's coming next, go to timestalks.com and subscribe to our newsletter. I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's event, which is part of our TimesTalks Downtown series presented by Cadillac. I hope you join us for a cocktail reception following tonight's program. Tonight, we're thrilled to be welcoming actor, screenwriter, and producer Rashida Jones, here to discuss the Netflix original documentary series, Hot Girls Wanted, Turned On, a continuation of the Sundance sensation which ignited a spirited debate surrounding internet pornography and the increasingly accepting culture around it. Joining the conversation for the question and answer portion of the program will be co-creators of the series, Jill Bauer and Ronna Gradus. You will hear much more about tonight's guests from our moderator, Katie Rosman, an editor and reporter for the Sunday Styles at the New York Times. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Katie Rosman and Rashida Jones.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello. I'm Katie Rosman with the New York Times. Thank you guys so much for being here, and thank you, Rashida Jones, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We are going to talk for about 40 minutes, and then we are going to bring out your co-creators and open up to a Q&A, and we will pass a mic around, so if you have any questions, you'll be able to ask them. So I wanted to talk to you about Women on Top. You did a documentary that was at Sundance in 2015 on the pornography industry. And then we're now in 2017, and you've got this Netflix 6-part series, mostly on the same topic. And so I just wanted to ask, what is the deal with you and pornography?
What is the deal? Well, I met Jill and Ronna, my co-creators, which, by the way, makes it sound like they're my parents or my gods or something. I met them at a conference, and I had seen their movie Sexy Baby, which was about coming of age in the digital age, and I was really moved by it, and it felt really honest and balanced to me, and I was just really fascinated by it. And they said, we're working on something in the world of porn. Are you interested? And I was like, yeah. I mean, by the way, who's not interested? You want to know more.
Yeah.
It's this weird thing that everybody engages in and nobody talks about. So I was interested because I'm fascinated by our relationship with women's sexuality in this country, our hypocrisy about being this sort of like puritanical nation, and then being kind of obsessed with sex and the dark side of sex and the secrets of sex. And also objectification. So it felt like all that stuff is happening in porn. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I knew that I had a deal with porn, but I do have I have some kind of deal with porn.
I think you have a deal with porn. And so, one of the things I thought you did really well in the Netflix series is balancing the idea that pornography in some cases is about women owning their bodies and owning their sexuality and really being in charge of how and what they want to do with their bodies and sex. But also there's a lot of, safety issues and scary issues and things that I think really reflect poorly on the status of women in our country. So how did you balance that, or was that something you guys were conscious of when you were making the documentary?
Yeah, for sure. Well, Hot Girls Wanted, which was the documentary that came out at Sundance, that was really focused on a group of young girls who answer these ads on Craigslist and show up in Miami and live in this sort of like sorority house and go out on bookings for porn, 18-year-old girls mainly. And it's a very specific type of porn, amateur porn, which is like a genre. It's not really amateur, but they like the girls to sort of be young so they can, act like they've never done whatever they're doing before. And, I think enlightening for people who watched it, but it also didn't represent the whole industry. It's a giant industry, and it's because it's now decentralized, like everything, because of the internet. You know, you can make porn anywhere, and anything that's like, you know, you make on a camera and upload that has sex in it is porn. Right. So there's so much more to talk about, and I think like every place in our life, technology is affecting our absolutely everything, our habits, our relationships, and to me the most, you know, compelling part of that is how it affects our intimacy and our relationship with ourselves and our sex lives and our dating lives. And we just, you know, I think Jill and Ronna and I wanted to tell more stories and keep the conversation going that nobody's having.
And how is it different doing something that is a documentary that is nonfiction with doing scripted material on television and film?
So different. You know, there's a huge responsibility that we feel to the people that we film. We want to make sure that they are portrayed as, you know, whole, balanced, complicated people. And that, you know, we really worked hard on the series to make sure that we presented the facts as we observed them, and, you know, leave it kind of up to you guys to interpret or talk about it with your friends, or, you know, feel whatever you're going to feel. But in that, you know, it's important to us that after we're done, our subjects still want to talk to us. Yeah. And that to me is a marker of, you know, not exploiting them. And, you know, it was so far so good. We, you know, we have good relationships with everybody we filmed. And, you know, and from the creative side, so much of it is made in the editing room. Like, you kind of craft the story in the editing room. Yeah. You film as much as you can. You try to get people to open up. You try to get them to feel comfortable around you. And then you have to go afterwards into the room and ask, what's the story?
Well, we have a clip that is sort of a trailer that gives a broad overview of some of the highlights of the series, and we'd like to show it to you now, if we can cue it up on the TV.
I am consenting to have sex today on camera.
Pretty much I'm a psychiatrist. I might be doing it naked, but I'm making a difference.
If it weren't for people that do this job, you wouldn't have your porn.
How's it going?
We can't ignore that porn today is sex education. I want to show sex, which is much more emotional.
I literally can't stop looking at that screen.
I'm in a room full of 300 people, but I'm on my phone, so technically, like, I'm alone.
From camming, I get a kind of relationship that I have trouble with in real life.
The same people who are judging you are the same people who consume your product. We have become so selfish. And I think a large part of that is due to social media. For me, being 40 years old, it's just completely unacceptable behavior.
I feel I'm a feminist. Women on the other side of the camera are great.
You deserve some real happiness, not just the computer fantasy.
My dad is never going to be okay with what I do.
Of all the decisions I've made, this is my best one.
Isn't it good? It's really good. So what was the worst part of making this? I mean, what was happening where you were like, I just want this to be over. I can't believe I agreed to do this.
Probably the time constraints. We essentially made 6 documentaries, because it's an anthology and there's different characters in every episode, in less than a year, which is insane. Like, you know, people spend 7 to 8 years making a movie, you know, but it doesn't make it any less difficult telling a story that's an hour long than an hour and a half.
Yeah, you
know?
Still need a beginning, middle, and end.
The time was, I mean, it was It was heavy, yeah.
How much went into finding the people?
A lot.
Because it's, you know, you can have sort of interesting issues to explore, but if you don't have interesting people to take you through it, then no one's going to really care.
Totally. And there was a lot of issues that we wanted to talk about. I mean, we didn't get to really talk about porn as sex ed for high schoolers. We didn't really get to talk about like gay relationships and gay porn. We talked a little bit about racism and porn, but we wanted to do that more. But this is probably something that's similar to scripted, which is casting is kind of everything. You know, you have to have the right protagonist to take you through, you know, everything. So it's very, very important.
So you would just report it, sort of you talk to someone and they'd be like, I know someone great, or, you know.
Yeah, well, Jill and Ronna are kind of like master detectives. So they're like psychological detectives. So they can kind of tell if there's something that we can like dig for, or if, you know, if the person, because a lot of people, when you meet them, they show you who they want you to think they are.
Yeah.
Everybody does that.
Yeah.
But especially when, you know, you're gonna have a camera following you for a while. And if you can see like a seed of something, you know, that you can work with, that they're gonna maybe open up to you, I think that's kind of what we look for.
And what was the best?
What's the best? You know, I really loved the episode I directed, Women on Top, which is kind of about women in porn and behind the camera and female empowerment. I just really loved the women that I met, you know, and it was just, I don't know, it was like I felt really connected to them, and I feel grateful to know them. And I think just once again, I mean, when you're doing this kind of stuff, like, everybody's so human. Every single person, the minute you start peeling back the layers, has so much more to say, so much more to offer, surprises, like all these kind of great things awaiting you. And it kind of, in a weird way, like gave me faith, you know, in people.
So in the episode you directed, there are these two great main women, and we'll see a clip of it. And well, there's three actually, main women. And one of them is their mother-daughter. And part of what was great is that you really got a sense of their relationship, and the idea of sort of growing up with pornography as a family business on the women's side of it is just so interesting and unusual. So how did you find them? How did you find Suze and her daughter?
We had heard of both of them because one of the girls who was in Hot Girls Wanted had worked with Holly and had said that was one of the best jobs I've ever had. I loved working with her. I loved the way she treated me. And Suze Randall's like kind of a legend. She was the first female staff photographer at Playboy. She worked at Penthouse, Hustler, and she's a whip. She's like a fierce, honest, hilarious person. We'd kind of heard about them and wanted to feature, like a kind of multi-generational story within the industry, and also somebody who was doing it at a time when it was really taboo for a woman to be working in that industry behind the camera, and she experienced a lot of sexism and, you know, whatever else, and she's tough, so she made it through. But they're great.
And the idea of sexism in pornography is sort of perverse in a way, that that a woman cannot take naked pictures of a woman is odd. I mean, it's not surprising, I guess. But
Right. No, it's true. Well, I mean, if you think, you know, I'm sure men probably feel like, oh, I'm going to take this picture through a male gaze, and therefore men will be turned on, which, by the way, is probably true. And I think that's why it's even cooler that we talked to Erica and Holly and Suze, because the idea, hopefully, is that women at some point feel like their desires are represented in the great big scope of pornography. There's so much of it on the internet, and so much of it is about the male fantasy, you know?
Separately, just a quick tangent. What did you think when Playboy announced that they were going to stop using naked women, girls in their magazine?
I thought it was interesting. Like, it was cool that they were trying to do something new, but I think probably that's like not our problem. I think we have, you know, again, we have this tension in this country where we're like so holier than thou, and then, you know, the most conservative places in the country are consuming the most porn. Like, we gotta get okay with like naked bodies, you know? And for me, it's been, as a feminist, it's been a long, hard learning process of how to, you know, be sort of critical of a larger cultural issue and be careful not to body shame women and make sure that everybody feels comfortable being in whatever state of undress they want to be in. But like, I'm not sure that's like solving any problems.
Yeah.
I thought it was like an interesting strategy, but did it work?
No.
Oh, okay. People like naked bodies,
I think
know?
you're going back to it. It's,
Yeah, there's maybe like another route they can take where they can still like have. Also, Playboy's like great, right? I mean, they're so esteemed and they have great interviews and.
Yeah, I read it for the interviews.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's watch the clip of your directed episode, because I want to ask a couple specific questions. I think this will give a launch.
The typical structure of a pornographic movie is that the man is the main character. It's about him, it's about his desire. That really didn't work out for me, because when I have sex with someone, it's about both of us. When you show sex, it should be based on values where you feel that the people in it, that they are connected, that they are respecting each other. Another thing that I didn't like about pornography was that most of it was so badly done. It didn't feel like they had cared about the cinematic vision of it. I realized that I wanted to see something made for women where you could actually see female pleasure, but at the same time, I wanted to see something aesthetically interesting. I thought, yeah, maybe I should try to make an adult movie.
She's great. She's so great.
She's so great.
She's so interesting and smart. I love there was a moment where you interviewed her and her partner, husband,
Pablo.
boyfriend, and he said, he was like, our sex is just very average. And she was like, what? But it, you know, it's like those real moments that really help connect it. And, you know, I loved, and maybe you guys picked these titles on purpose, but you flashed to certain titles of some of the adult films that she was making. And there was The Bitch Hiker, which I was like, that's a really good headline.
Yeah,
I'm a writer,
it's
that's
great.
good.
Yeah.
And also Titty Titty Bang Bang.
Titty Titty Bang Bang's good, yeah. It's funny.
There
So
I mean,
good,
is there good writing in porn?
I mean, in general, I don't know.
You tell me.
I think, you know, Erica's project that she was working on when we were filming her is called Ex Confessions, and what she does is people write to her, women write to her and tell her their fantasies, and then she brings them to life. So, you know, it's sort of like a crowdsourced writing situation, which is cool because then you know that somebody somewhere is going to really like it, you know, at least one person. Yeah. But yeah, I think, you know, with somebody like Erica, she does care about that stuff. Like, she's a filmmaker. She wants everything from the puns in the titles to, you know, the dialogue to the, you know, shot to be great.
But it's broadly not necessarily the case.
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
I wouldn't think so.
No, but it's also like, it's the same way that everything's been democratized, like music, film, you know, everything is like uploadable, and so you get like the whole spectrum of quality, which is like just true about every industry, you know.
So Suze, who is a part of this episode, but we don't see, is this woman who was the first staff photographer for Playboy. And right at the beginning of the episode, she says something where she says, you know, we used to shoot women the whole bush. And I was so like, you know, seeing this like nice little grandma looking person say bush. And it made me really embarrassed, and I wrote it down. I'm like, I gotta ask her about that. But and then I was thinking, well, our president says pussy, and you know, so are we just, and then to tie it all together, the two women in this episode, the two elder women, are from Europe. So are we as Americans just more prude? I think of myself as a somewhat liberated person, but I got embarrassed by watching some woman.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Sue's at the time when she started working in her industry was not the norm. You know, she's totally like raw and not a prude at all, and hilarious. But she's used to that. She's been doing that for many, many, many years. But I think it's like, I do think it's just different attitudes in Europe. Like they just don't have as much stuff around female bodies. Like. We have so many politics around it. I mean, look at where we are politically. It's like there's like this fight for ownership always of a woman's body, and I think that's really reflected in porn. And you know, I think we're not necessarily prude, but we're like these two like crazy diametrically opposed extremes where we're like just don't want to talk about it at all, and then we're just like fulfilling every nasty, deep, dark fantasy that you could ever have is available for you in the world of pornography on the internet, which is like would be more fine if we talked about it, but we don't talk about it. So it's weird that like everybody's engaging and then nobody's talking about it. It's like this weird, shameful, private thing.
Well, and what's complicated is that porn, some of what you're saying is that porn is the problem and the solution.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's not going anywhere. And I also think like, you know, as adult entertainment, for the most part, like, yeah, do your thing. Like, see, you know, look for whatever you want that gets you off. But the problem is, it's sort of being used as sex education for children, as Erica said in that clip. I mean, the average age that a kid watches porn for the first time is 11. And, you know, we just did the study that went along with the series that 80% of kids happen upon porn for the first time accidentally. So that could be before their first kiss, you know? So like, I do think we kind of collectively have a responsibility to discuss that. Parents, adults, you know, culturally, there's gotta be a conversation around that because it's gonna change the way people have sex, especially if you're learning about it that young, just is.
Yeah, and why is it different in Europe? I mean,
I don't know, I guess they're older. We're like a young country, you know. They've been through. I mean, they had their time, their sexually repressed times, you know, where they were like doing dark stuff, you know, under the cover of night, and like, you know, being Victorian during the day. So, I guess we haven't really like reconciled. We're having an identity crisis. Like it feels like our light and dark are so obvious right now, and they're fighting each other for control.
And how do you think? The election of Donald Trump, that half of our country wanted that for our future, sort of.
Not half.
Well, yeah.
A quarter.
Well, not a popular majority, but an electoral majority, whatever.
Yeah.
How does that? I mean, what does that say about our sexuality as a nation, not sexuality, but our sensuality or comfort or discomfort with sex and expressions of it?
I mean, that's a good question. I think, you know, I mean, the thing that's most obvious to me is, you know, there's somebody in the White House who is sort of openly encouraging sexual assault, and enough women felt okay with that to still vote for him. So in my mind, they must have had the privilege of not feeling like threatened by that statement, that they could bypass that, overlook that, and still like other things about him, which a lot of women in this country don't have that privilege.
Yeah,
you know,
true.
They will be a victim of assault. They will feel scared for their lives. And, you know, the one good thing we know that's come out of this is it's been so galvanizing for everybody, but I do feel like talking about sex in a real way and in a healthy way does feel like a bit of like an FU to the current administration, because there is so much like suppression and control that they're going for, that it's like, if we talk about it, that's, you know, the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, that's
you know.
true.
Also, our president was in a softcore porn, so.
Oh, right. Tell us about that.
I mean, I just like, didn't he like pour like champagne in a limo or something in a Playboy video?
Probably.
So.
It sounds like something he would have done.
Yeah.
Allegedly. And also, another thing about the Europeans, so in the episode that you directed, Erica is putting together a piece where a piano player is receiving, say it?
Cunnilingus, but Erica, who's adorably Swedish, says cunnilinguist.
Cunnilinguist.
Which I feel like should be a word.
Yeah.
Kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
you know?
it's like you can major in it at like Wesleyan or
yes,
something.
Yes, exactly. It's the language of cunnilingus.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
So she is going to experience this while she's playing piano, and this woman is a first-time participant in porn. And when the piano player speaks of it, she has a Spanish. I think she's Spanish.
She's from Spain.
And she calls it adult cinema with this really great accent, and it just made me think like that sounds so much better than porn flick. I mean, even just there's. Just the Europeans even say it better than us.
I know, but we can't sit here and, I mean, listen, Europe has their own issues.
Yeah.
It does sound, the accents sound great, and they do have a better, in general, like a better relationship with sex, but they have, they got their own issues.
Yeah. And another thing, I mean, so many things like caught my ear in the episode, but when Suze's daughter, Holly, I mean, it was interesting. She was helping people get dressed for this fantasy porn she was filming.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons, and a woman knows a woman's body better. I understand what you're saying about the male gaze, but a woman knows sort of what fits and what looks pretty and feels pretty, and she was worried about this sort of like metal bodice, and she said she was worried that it was gonna give her underboob, and she was like, underboob, it's the new side boob. I was like, that's a style story, we should do that.
That is kind
of so it was really, I thought, well done and wonderful, but so were many of the other episodes, and I want to introduce the third clip that we're gonna see, and it's a great piece about the role of not just online dating, but sort of the swiping online dating, where there's the potential for this immediate gratification, immediate meeting, Tinder, and I think Bumble to a certain degree, and a couple others I hadn't even heard of. And again, you found great characters. And as I was watching this, and you're seeing these girls/women talk about they really like this guy, but he hasn't texted them back, and since she texted him, she's seen that he liked something on Twitter, and so she knows he's on his phone, and I felt like...
Social media detective.
Yeah, I felt like this has got to be so agonizing, but then I was thinking, no, maybe James is just the biggest jerk ever. Is he? I mean, this guy James, you guys will see in a minute, he is...
Again, we were not out to pass judgment. We just were presenting the story.
I think I'm saying it like really.
We were just presenting the story.
Let's watch it.
Yeah, let's watch it. You guys.
Yeah.
I was excited when, out of nowhere, I met James. Dating him is a different story. He always opens up my door, always texts me good morning, good night, I miss you, thinking about you. I assume that we are exclusive, and I can picture a future with us two, and hopefully he can picture the same.
It's been a weak-ass weekend for dating apps. No. Ooh, no. With Jessica, right now it's fun. She's a sweet girl, I have fun with her, but I can see myself not dating her long-term. Look at this one, right across the street. We like Ashley.
You have so many different options right at your fingertips. Technology has definitely made commitment and relationships almost a thing of the past.
I thought that line, I could see myself not dating her in the future, was just like the best.
I can see myself not doing a lot of things in the future, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. What? You ask a question.
I don't know. I mean, I just thought I feel like he would not be upset. I mean, he comes off as as I think he portrays himself to be.
Well, okay, so
he's going to get a reality show. He's going to love it.
That's the thing is, so we, telling the story is kind of difficult with like just any normal guy because I think most guys don't want to give up the goods on how they strategize their dating life. Yeah. And James had been on Big Brother. He was like a contestant on Big Brother. So he was already like very comfortable with cameras in his life. And he was like kind of a nerd in high school. He didn't go to his senior prom. And I think he's like being the guy he thought he wanted to be at like age 16, But you watch the episode, but through the course of it, I think he starts to understand the consequences. And in some ways, like, I don't even blame him because, you have your phone and it's like you have your dating app, you have Amazon, you have all these things you can just swipe like, oh, that's a better price. And it's all kind of the same technology and interface and they're all next to each other. And it's sort of designed to take the humanity out of it. So, I think it's not hard to do that. I mean, I think treating it like a game and being very conspicuous about that, not everybody does that, but he's just, at least he's being honest about it.
Yeah.
People are doing that and they're pretending like they're not, so.
Well, so his friend said something, the woman who I think was his friend who was in it, she was talking about how the way that his attention span has been depleted was impacting his ability to stick with one person and really find out if he liked her, which I thought was so interesting because I have trouble reading a book now. I mean, it is hard to, but I had never thought about it in terms of I can't like fall in love or, like someone because, I mean, do you think that's really happening?
Yeah, I mean, I watched this piece on 60 Minutes, like this past weekend about this guy used to work at Google and he was like, one day he woke up and was like, wait a second, nobody here cares about anybody's lives getting better. They just care about keeping them addicted to their phones. Like the whole algorithm, like the entire thing is about getting people's cortisol levels to spike and panic when they don't have their phone and then to see something and be like, and like get a sense of relief. And that's true with like everything on your phone, whether it's like, a news story or a date or whatever it is. But like, yeah, I think we're retraining our brains. I mean, it's a two-way street. This whole idea that technology is this like organically existing thing and like, sorry guys, it's up to you to decide like how to organize your brain and figure out how to have some sort of like filter with your relationship with technology. Like, no, the whole thing is designed for us to keep coming back. So yeah, I definitely think our attention spans are like, zoop.
I think that they are too. I just hadn't necessarily thought of it in terms of
like relationships and romance and
of just even being able to sort of like the same person. But that's what she was saying, that like he's got to constantly see what else is on Tinder, like in case there's a girl
he's
that
passed over, like he doesn't want to settle with that one because of the next one. Yeah, but then you also see like there's another story we tell, Take Me Private, that's about a guy who's been camming with this girl for 4 years and never met her in person. And, he's kind of shy and awkward. And, he says, this is a relationship that I would probably never have in real life. So, there is some virtual intimacy that's possible, but the question is going to be, and only time will tell, is it real? Will it stick? Are we really connecting or are we more lonely?
So I wanted to ask about sort of some of the dark sides that you guys expose. I was really, in the beginning of the episode, The Money Shot, which is just such a gross phrase. I mean, I know why you guys
It's a good title, come on.
It's a good title for what the episode was, for sure, but as a general phrase. Anyway, but when they have these people on set repeating after me, I am here on my own free will, and when this little girl is saying I'm 18 years old, and you really like, I mean, how much do you think that people are actually doing this stuff of their own free will, and that people are actually of age, not even that 18 is of an age where you can make a decision that you are prepared to live with your whole life, which you need to be, but
it's really hard to tell, and everybody's so different, And I think from the movie and from the series, we've seen the whole spectrum of empowerment and ownership, where like you have somebody who's like fully in their sexuality and feels really good about it, and sometimes it's not about age, you know, sometimes like there's young people who are like that, and then you see people who just felt like they didn't want to disappoint somebody, or you know, they liked it at first and then they didn't like it, and they sort of felt like they had to stay, and they were coerced to finish the, you know, the movie because they weren't going to get paid or whatever it is. I mean, I think it's a spectrum, and it's a very gray area in terms of consent. But and side note, Money Shot really is, there's no show without the money shot. I mean, it's called the money shot for a reason.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of pressure on guys to perform and to finish, and like that's the only way you have that. The movie is the money shot, so it is.
Did you want to like save anybody? Was there anyone that you just wanted to say, you have such potential, you don't see what I see, I wish I could take you away from this?
I really wanted Jax, who's one of the porn performers we follow in Money Shot, and he's like this really gentle spirit, and he's a like large, muscular, beautiful black man, and he's cast, as often happens in mainstream porn, as like a monster and an aggressor. And there's so much racism in porn that nobody wants to talk about. You know, interracial porn, which is only, by the way, a black man and a white woman, not the other way around, is like its own kind of fetish porn. And when a white girl agrees to do that, it like changes her whole career. It's like that's the end of the taboo line, which is so crazy
really,
that we don't talk about
the most taboo thing in porn?
It's one of them, yeah. And he's so gentle, and you know, he keeps being cast as this thing, and I just kind of want him to be able to be his gentle self, and you know, in a scene. That's what I want for him.
And what cite other evidence of racism in porn? What other sort of stuff?
I mean, there's like, you know, these sites, these facial abuse sites, and it's exactly what it sounds like, and it's featured in the movie. We kind of stay away from like any details, but you know, it's very dark and very raw, and it's men abusing women, and there's Latina abuse, which is just men shouting racial slurs at Latina women and choking them and making them vomit, and it's dark, and it's all kind of protected and under the guise of fantasy, because you cannot interfere with people's sexual fantasies. But it's weird. It's like the one place where all the kind of decency and respect that we've worked really hard, well, some of us have worked really hard to collectively create, like, just doesn't apply.
And why is there never a black woman and a white man?
There is, but it's not considered interracial porn.
I don't even get it.
It's just, it's a stereotype, you know? It's just a stereotype.
Wow. Well, I think that we're going to ask your co-creators to come out and join us. We're really lucky to have Jill, God and God,
come out,
Jill and Ronna, come out here. I asked them before what they were in charge of specifically, and they said everything. So,
what they were in charge of?
Yeah, I said, you know, did you direct this?
Oh, right.
Like we were in charge of everything.
Yeah, they're in charge of everything.
And I believed it.
No, I think I said, no, we just tried to control. We just tried to. We weren't control freaks, but we kind of were watching everything.
Yeah, in a nice way.
In a nice way, exactly.
All right, we have a couple Facebook questions, I think, from people on Facebook Live. And this is from Stephen Lopezanski. What did you learn that you never thought you would? Would you share with us, Ronna?
I think we're collectively just really surprised at how far we have not come since we began doing this work. I mean, the conversation has not really publicly progressed, so here we are almost like 8 years later, and we're still trying to push this conversation into the mainstream.
So that's where we haven't progressed. It's still happening on the margins and not in the mainstream.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all just been like pushing this agenda to especially get this conversation into schools and like have people acknowledge that we need to be open with kids about this. And like that certainly is not happening.
About sex or pornography?
Well, about the fact that, I mean, often if there is sex ed, it's very technical and there's discussion of like STIs and safe sex, but there's not really a conversation about the act of sex. So kids then look for that online. And that's not the best way to learn about sex.
So they're connected to each other because they're not getting enough information. Correct. So they're Googling it.
Absolutely.
Is there anything separate that you learned that you never, that surprised you or that you never thought that you would?
We had a partnership with Indiana University and the Kinsey Institute, and they conducted a study, basically. It was the first of its kind, post-internet. And we found out through this survey that basically parents have no idea what their kids are seeing. We kind of suspected that, but the disconnect is pretty great. So, I mean, we suspected it. It wasn't a huge revelation, but I think when the numbers came in, we were like, oh, this is, pretty shocking.
Alarming.
Yeah.
Alarming. All right, Penelope Dawn. Did the reporting, did the work change your mind on anything?
Of the series?
Yeah.
Huh, that's a really tough question. Go for it.
Say, like when Rashida was talking about Tom and Alice, the cam girl and her super fan, yeah, I think just the exploration of the fact that there can be something positive in like the online on-screen relationship.
Will you explain a little bit more about
Yeah, so camming, I know a lot of people don't know what that is. It's sort of like the Uberization of pornography. It's the new frontier where essentially women and men, but mostly women, have a webcam and they basically are creating their own like sexual content from the comfort of their own home. And anyone from anywhere in the world can log on and
Live,
yeah, and watch them and interact with them. So we, Jill and I frequented many porn conventions and had noticed that there were a lot of these like kind of introverted men who just had this great admiration for like one or two cam girls, and it was very clear that they were like these super fans. So we knew we wanted to do an episode on that. So we found a cam girl who was based in LA, and like her biggest super fan is this guy in Australia. So for 4 years, they were basically having this online sexual and emotional relationship. And it was surprisingly a very, very sweet story.
And when you cam, you're not just doing it for one person, it's for whoever tunes in, but then you can develop something with a
Right, the way it works is like you can do a show and people tip you, but then the real money is in, and the episode is called Take Me Private, because basically a viewer can pay to just have you one-on-one and then make like special requests and actually like Skype with you essentially on that platform.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's sad in a way. I mean, I understand what that.
Yeah, and yes, and that episode in the end is quite heart-wrenching because, yeah, at the end of the day, their relationship cannot exist in the real world.
Yeah, yeah. What about you guys? Anything that changed your mind about something?
I mean, people do ask this question often, and it's a tough one because we've been in this space of the intersection of sex and technology for 10 years. But I mean, I would say that I've always just been very interested in stories about people, and when you go into this people have such individual tastes when it comes to sex, and Rashida very eloquently was talking about people's relationships with their technology, and so I'm just very I'm kind of probably if I went episode by episode, I would tell you something that I learned and something that was very surprising because it's really peeling an onion every time you meet somebody and every time you, every episode you were talking about James, When we met James, we were like, oh, this guy, he's a player, And we were, as women, really offended by his behavior because, we had experienced that similar behavior from men that we had engaged with online. And so, but then when we met him and we got to know him, he was, of course, charming and engaging. And then we found that he was ultimately really insecure. So every episode was surprising. And lonely
the
also.
women who wanted to date him were maddening too. I mean, that's who you just want, so maddening. They are texting, like begging him to text back, and he's tweeting at somebody else and ignoring them. And
But we all do that. It's
One more
maddening to
chance.
watch them. Yeah, but I think everybody wants answers.
Yeah, no.
Like,
so, the concept of ghosting.
Yeah,
is
there's
so
no accountability.
Unbelievable. Do you guys all know what ghosting is?
Pretty much everybody. No, not everybody. That's great, by the way, that you don't know what ghosting is. Congratulations.
It's when somebody just disappears
like
and
you
refuses
dated
to
them, you had
respond.
sex with them, you just connected online, and they're just gone, and they never write you back ever again.
That's it's
frustrating.
It's maddening, and how much that is a part of the vernacular, and how much people are talking about ghosting is,
Sign of the times.
I was ghosted offline back in the good old days by this guy.
Like somebody was like, bye.
Yeah. He didn't say
person?
bye.
Oh, he didn't say bye. Right.
He just disappeared.
Stop calling.
And he's watching now. But it is. You want to be acknowledged, even just to.
Yeah. Well, I will say that surprised me. The potential for desensitization is what really surprised me. That episode, and also we have an episode that's about this teenage girl who, was arrested and brought to trial for filming her friend getting raped by a guy for 10 minutes live on Periscope. And, it's a hard episode to watch. She's a Russian immigrant who moved to Ohio. She's very lonely. All her friends are back home. The majority of her life is spent online. And I think it probably does something to your understanding of reality, But
wow,
we gotta talk about it, at least.
So let's have some questions from the audience, and it's great how sort of intimate it all is, but let's still use the microphone because it allows the people listening on Facebook Live, speaking of disconnected internet. And I think there's, okay, we'll start here and we'll come to you after.
Hi. I was particularly moved and upset by some of the stuff in the documentary. The Latina abuse porn that Rashida, you mentioned, and just kind of the attitude of a lot of it. I know you can't judge what someone is into sexually, but it's just kind of like, what can we do? I guess having the conversation is part of it, but is there anything that we can do in the public to kind of change what's happening? I know that's kind of a loaded, intense question, but what can we do?
That's a good question.
I mean, porn is not going anywhere. We are not going to shut it down. But I think
and we don't want to shut it down.
And we don't want to shut
it down.
But I think the way that we have become discerning customers of what we eat and where our clothes come from and is the factory treating its workers well, I think we can do the same thing with the porn we watch, is question how it was made, who made it, do the performers look happy? Just begin to be aware of the product more.
In response to that, I'm a mom, so I pick the food that my kids eat, and I pick the clothes that my kids wear. And, I don't want to pick their porn. Right. But I do want to say to my 15-year-old, I don't know if he's watching this now, but if you're watching porn, don't expect your friends at school to want to do that stuff with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another thing you can do is just whenever there's a chance and it's not awkward. I know parents don't ever want to talk to their kids about sex, and they don't want to talk to them about porn in the event that they haven't watched it. But I think you kind of have to assume they've watched it or they've heard about it. If if they're 15, for sure. But I think it's just like porn is not sex. Porn is adult entertainment. It's their movies, it's fantasy, it's not real life. I mean, there's kind of this movement in this country around media literacy, and we're interested in porn literacy. We have to separate the two. It can't be the expectation of what's happening in that porn, the way they look, what they do to each other, what they seem to like on camera. I mean, even one of the people in your first film, Sexy Baby, says, can I curse on this?
I don't know.
Okay, no, I won't do it.
Go.
She says she was in porn, and she was like, yeah, her and her husband were both in porn, and she says, yeah, when we're home, we have sex. When I'm on camera, we're sport effing. Like, we know the positions that are gonna look good for other people. Like, it's a whole different game, and I think anytime you have an opportunity to talk to your friends who have kids or to talk to your kids, I know it's so awkward, but it's essential,
Well, here's an example. So Jill and I have spent a lot of time on college campuses, and we're also seeing this reflected in the survey that we did and the statistics that are coming in. You probably don't know, but like choking, for example, is very common in sex for people, like young people, to choke each other. And most parents, that's like a bizarre concept. So I think if we as adults become educated about what they're exposed to, we can at least say, hey, that choking you might see, that's not necessarily the norm.
But then also, because your question is a really good one, and it's one that we've been asked for a really long time, ever since we made our first film, that people were talking about this, the subject matter, it's the zeitgeist, and then 9 years later, we're still getting that. So there needs to be some answer, and because look, Suze and Holly have this conversation in Rashida's episode that two women that are in the porn industry, the mother-daughter who are making porn, couldn't have the sex ed conversation when Holly was young. Oh, yeah. So if they can't have the conversation,
nobody's having
then good luck, right? And and this conversation isn't being had in schools, so there needs to be an answer, because getting sex ed in schools is just going to be an impossibility for a really long time. And we don't know what the answer is, but people ask us all the time. So people, we ask it back to you.
Yeah, I mean, 50%, I think 50% of the kids in this country have 2 days or less of sex ed.
Wow.
Just to put things in perspective.
Wow. Let's pass the mic over here. And also, that was my sister who does want to pick out the porn for her kids.
Oh. Maybe you should then.
I will take care of it. You let Zach know to text me, and I'll take care of it. Okay. Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to know, how is, pornography regulated? Because it sounds to me like if there's abuse going on, isn't that ultimately illegal?
It's not regulated, and it probably will never be.
Like child pornography,
that is. Illegal. I mean, that's the only thing. Is
that's
under
illegal.
18.
It's not regulated.
Illegal.
If there's
they're performers, and they're playing a part, and so everything is sort of protected under the fact that they're making movies and they're performers and they're consenting.
So the physical abuse is.
They've consented to it.
They've consented to it. Obviously it's different when I do a fight scene in a movie. There's days of choreography, and we're not really hitting each other. It's a little different when you're dealing with sex or somebody's vomiting on screen. You're actually doing that stuff, and it's probably harder on your body, but unfortunately it's protected because it's consensual.
And you want to be careful of regulation, presumably, because
it's a slippery
slope.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah. Then all of a sudden,
other sexy things are being regulated.
But again, I think Europe is starting to regulate certain things in porn.
Really?
Yeah.
Like what sort of stuff?
I think there's no urination on camera.
Oh, poor Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Poor Donald Trump.
But I think also also I think no clear aggression, no hitting. I think that's become a thing. Okay. But also, the reason it's so hard to regulate now is that it used to be that there were main production companies that shipped out porn to the whole country, like DVDs, and they had to comply with like the Bible Belt and all the different regulations in the different states. So it was a lot easier to keep things from being totally obscene. But now that it can be made anywhere and dispersed anywhere in the country, like anything goes. Violent sex?
Yeah.
Well, I think some of what they're saying is, you know, like, let the market decide.
Yeah, I mean, it's just free market capitalism, and I feel like it's happening in every single industry, which is like, well, if there's money to be made, goodbye regulations, goodbye moral parameters. Like anything is like happy to move out of the way if there's money to be made in this country, unfortunately.
Can we hand the mic? Okay, I can repeat oh wait, here comes the microphone for you.
Rashida, you seem very comfortable and cool with your sexuality, which I really appreciate.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to take this to like a lighter place, but did you learn anything from this experience or get any pointers? Because I feel like you're not being judgmental. There's, you know, no awe, and I feel bad with the exception of someone being himself during sex. So it seems like you might be the kind of person that would ask the right question to learn more about sex.
Well, it was definitely my first time on a porn set, and at first I was like, woo, unprofessional, like, ooh, look right. And then after 10 minutes, you're like, oh my God, this is like hard work. It was 100 degrees. They were like having sex on a rock. Jada, who was the lead female performer, was wearing armor. I mean, it was really difficult, and it reminded me of acting, where you're like selling this ease and this, you know, amazing hot moment, and really it's all staged and it's smoke and mirrors, and like nothing's easy, you know, which I don't know if that's a pointer necessarily,
Did it make you realize your job is relatively easy?
Oh yeah.
You don't have to call your agent and say, no sex on the rock, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, no. I had a lot of respect for this performance, because also the two performers in that movie have been doing it for a really long time, and they respected each other, and they had like such a nice rapport, and they were really supportive of each other in like kind of bad circumstances, and I was really impressed with the way everybody treated each other.
How do you foresee the growth of virtual reality affecting this industry?
I mean, it's definitely something we didn't cover this run of episodes, but we would like to.
Our researcher at Indiana University at the Kinsey Institute, he's sort of studying that a little bit, and he said to us he's not convinced that it's going to, you know,
take off.
Replace.
Yeah.
You know.
There's some like glitches that they have to work out, but yeah, I do think that once there's an immersive experience, augmented reality specifically, which I think is kind of much easier to do technologically, if I understand it correctly, is even crazier, because then you're like in your home, and then you're like having sex with whatever hologram you want in your own bed. I mean, I'm sure there'll be like other things to touch and feel, but
that they will work out the VR.
Oh yeah,
I mean, there's
they'll
a lot
figure it out.
You know, Facebook is deeply invested in it. They're not, you know,
it's
once
nuts.
they decide.
It's gonna, if it does catch on, it's gonna change everything, because I don't know if you guys have done VR, but it's the weirdest thing where once 3 of your senses are engaged somewhere else, like your whole brain is tricked into believing you're somewhere else.
Wow.
Like it's not even, you know, a question.
Wow. We have a question in the back there.
You've talked a lot about the people on camera, but how do you think that the audience or target has changed? Like, it still seems like it's dominated towards men. Like, how do you think that the audience has changed?
Well, you know, I think our hope is that because we're showing that there's women working in this field, and they're so relatable and likable and funny and good at what they do, that, you know, we're gonna take some of, you know, there's a lot of women doing that work, and hopefully there will be more, because you look and you see an example, like we were talking to someone today, and he was, saying that for him, he's gay, and seeing in porn 2 men kiss for the first time really helped him to come to terms with his own sexuality. So it's just about example, I think. And I think it's about telling women it's okay to have an appetite for porn, because then you can actually ask for what you want, Whereas like if it's a male-dominated industry and it's all about like making sure the male fantasy is represented, you're never gonna get what you want, but you kind of can't be quiet and also get what you want.
I would presume there's more female consumers now that it can be accessed privately. You don't have to go into a store and buy it. So
I'm sure. I mean, I don't know any stats, but I'm sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Hope so.
We have a question here and here. Maybe we can walk the mic around and bring it back up here.
So at the end of the film, a teenager decides to leave the industry, partly because her boyfriend and mother were, talking to her about it. Did that surprise you? And did it sort of prove the concept that exposure of this industry can have a dramatic impact in a short time on a life?
Well, in that genre of porn, I mean, the moment that Jill and I sort of camped out in that house, the cycle was very clear to us, because that type of porn, like they just want new faces all the time. So going into that film, we already saw that the average shelf life was about like 6 to 9 months. So really, yeah, I mean, she just followed suit. And usually what happens is like the second their first video goes online, their high school friends find out, and it sort of makes its rounds in their towns. And I think once they're outed, they're quite often, unfortunately, shamed, and then it's just not sustainable, and they leave.
I'll just add to that. I think what was surprising in that moment, because it was like a real moment. I mean, it was probably since we've been working on documentaries, it was probably like one of the most real and candid moments of our careers. And that just played out. Like, we didn't say anything or do anything. We just were standing there, and they were having that conversation. The mother and the daughter were having that conversation. And I mean, to go back to sex ed, I think that was really the surprise, was that, Tressa was very impulsive, and she left town because she wanted freedom. And then she was back, and she, was so conflicted when she decided to get out. It wasn't a clear out. It wasn't a clear, I'm gonna get out. She was just wedged between her boyfriend and her mother on the couch, and she was having to choose between freedom or her relationship with her boyfriend and her mom. And that was really painful to watch, that, because she was in a socioeconomic situation where she couldn't do whatever she wanted. So it was kind of everything combined. It was a girl who grew up not really having sex ed, not really understanding this impulsive decision that she made, and then having this very conflicted decision.
We have time for one last question. Would you like to ask?
Can we just go back to the choking thing for a second? I'm not really familiar with it. I'm sort of freaked out by the whole thing, just hearing about it. And I'm wondering, like, A, what do you get from that? B, I mean, could this whole trend have stemmed from, like, porn? I mean, where does a trend like that come from?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's totally from porn.
Yeah, it's more than, I mean, there are a few sort of classic taken straight from porn moves that we were talking about at this
hair pulling, like intense hair pulling, choking, spitting. Spitting's very porny.
Is the choking like auto asphyxiation? Is it?
No, I think it's just more like the
Visual?
image of it, or like the idea of it, but I don't think you're actually supposed to pass out.
But that's a slippery slope, I mean, that's the kind of thing. It's like because it's like the desire is to have less breath and it's like more arousing. It's like every time you have to go tighter and tighter. I mean, people hurt themselves by accident doing that. That's what it is, very scary for like a kid to be experimenting with that.
Yeah. But yeah, no, we've heard, I mean, like firsthand accounts that like, I was just hooking up with the guy and it was our first date and he put his hands on my neck. And like, but it's very, yeah, it's unfortunately like becoming more commonplace.
We were scouting, we went to a college campus, I don't know, probably like less than a year ago, and we were just walking around and we just sat down with these fraternity guys and we're just having this whole conversation with them about their sex lives, because we do that.
And we said, what's the one thing you think you've all gotten from porn that didn't used to exist? And like it was unanimous. They all were like joking.
Where were you guys at school?
University of Miami.
Wow.
But the kids were from all over. We made sure that we were sitting with kids from all over the country. And yeah.
Wow. On that note,
should we end on a more positive note?
Well, it's really a wonderful series. I congratulate you guys, and I hope everybody watches it, because there is a lot of levity, and there's just a lot to learn and consider and think about. And thank you guys so much for being here with us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
guys.
for having us. Thanks for moderating.